Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Wren. I'm 34 years old. My sister's husband tossed the quilt I had stitched by hand for 9 months onto a gift table like it was a grocery bag. And before the room even went quiet, my sister laughed and said, "She still thinks this family needs her." That was the moment I stopped being the useful daughter. Not dramatically. Not with screaming. I didn't flip a table, or ruin the baby shower, or make some speech that everyone could call embarrassing later. I just bent down, picked up the quilt, smoothed the corner where it had touched the floor, and walked out with it folded against my chest. The next morning, my attorney's office called. But to understand why that phone call changed everything, you need to understand what that quilt was. It wasn't just fabric. It was my grandmother's old cotton dresses, cut into careful squares. It was the blue floral apron she wore every Thanksgiving. It was the pale yellow sleeve from the dress she wore in the last photo we ever took with her, standing under the maple tree behind my parents' house, smiling like she knew something the rest of us didn't. Grandma Elise had saved fabric in labeled boxes for years. "Good cloth remembers," she used to say. When she died, my mother, Patricia Vale, cried in front of everyone at the funeral. Big, shaking sobs. My sister, Bethany Vale, dabbed her eyes with a tissue and leaned into her husband, Grayson Miller, like she was the tragic center of the room. I was the one who cleaned out Grandma's sewing room. I was the one who found the boxes. I was the one who sat on the floor breathing in cedar and lavender sachets, reading Grandma's handwriting on faded masking tape. Blue church dress. Christmas table runner. Natalie's curtains. Age 7. Bethany never came to help. She said grief made her physically weak. My mother said, "Don't make your sister feel guilty. She processes things differently." That was our family's favorite sentence. Bethany processes things differently. Which somehow meant I processed everything for her. When Bethany announced she was pregnant with her first baby, my mother immediately decided there would be a shower at the country club. Not the community hall Grandma loved. Not the backyard where we used to string lights between the trees. The country club, because Bethany wanted soft neutrals, elegant balloons, and no homemade-looking stuff. I should have listened to that last part. But I had already started the quilt. Every night after work, I sat at my dining table under a small lamp and stitched one square at a time. I chose the fabrics like a conversation between generations. Grandma's blue florals, a cream muslin from an old pillowcase, tiny green checks from a dress my mother wore when she was younger and kinder, or at least when I still believed she was. In the center, I embroidered the baby's initials, E.M.M., Evelyn May Miller. I stitched those letters with trembling care because I wanted my niece to have one thing in that house that was not purchased to impress strangers. One thing that said, "You came from women who made things last." By the morning of the shower, my fingers were sore. The skin near my thumb had a tiny split from pulling thread. I wrapped the quilt in white tissue paper and tied it with a satin ribbon Grandma had once saved from a Christmas gift. I remember standing in my hallway, holding that box, feeling foolishly hopeful. That's the part I hate admitting. I still hoped. The country club dining room was already full when I arrived. Beige balloons. White roses. Gold name cards. A dessert table with cookies shaped like baby bottles. My mother was fluttering around in a champagne-colored dress, telling everyone Bethany had such refined taste. Bethany sat in a wicker chair near a wall of windows, one hand resting on her belly, the other holding a sparkling lemonade she wasn't drinking. She looked beautiful. She always did. Soft curls, perfect blush, that calm little smile she used when she knew every eye was on her. When she saw me, her smile tightened. "Oh," she said, "you brought something big." My mother looked at the box in my hands and whispered, "Natalie, I hope it's appropriate." Appropriate? As if love could clash with a color scheme. I set the box on the gift table. "It's for Evelyn." Grayson was standing nearby with 2 of his friends, laughing too loudly. He had always treated me like I was a staff member who happened to share DNA with his wife. At holidays, he asked me where serving spoons were. At my father's birthday, he handed me his empty plate, without looking. He glanced at the box and smirked. Is this one of your craft projects? Bethany giggled into her glass. I felt heat rise in my face, but I kept my voice even. It's a quilt from Grandma Lisa's fabric. That should have mattered. For 1 second, I thought it did. My mother's eyes flicked toward the box. Something moved across her face. Then Bethany sighed. Natalie, this isn't really the vibe. People nearby heard her. I watched 2 cousins pretend to study the cookie table. My Aunt Marlene froze with a paper plate in her hand. I said quietly, You haven't even opened it. Grayson reached for the box before I could stop him. He pulled off the ribbon, tore through the tissue, and lifted the quilt by one corner. Not unfolded. Not held. Lifted, like wet laundry. The room got smaller. The blue squares caught the light. Grandma's fabrics, my stitches, 9 months of evenings, hanging from his hand, while he looked amused. Then he dropped it. Not onto a chair. Not into the box. Onto the edge of the gift table, half sliding down, one corner touching the floor. Yeah, he said. Looks homemade. Bethany laughed. Then she said the line I will hear for the rest of my life. She still thinks this family needs her. No one corrected her. Not my mother. Not my father, Leonard, sitting near the back with his coffee. Not any of the relatives who had eaten meals I cooked, worn scarves I knitted, borrowed money I never mentioned again, and called me whenever Bethany was too overwhelmed. The room went silent. In that particular way families go silent when they are choosing the comfortable lie over the obvious truth. I looked at my mother. She looked away first. That hurt more than Bethany. I walked to the table. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I picked up the quilt and brushed the corner with my palm. There was a speck of dust on Grandma's yellow fabric. I removed it carefully. Bethany rolled her eyes. Oh my God, don't make a scene. I looked at her then. Really looked. At my little sister, who had taken my room when she wanted more closet space. Who had cried when I got into the college she didn't. Who had worn my engagement dress to a rehearsal dinner after my own engagement ended and said, at least someone got use out of it. And I finally understood. She did not want to be loved. She wanted to be chosen. And my family had trained me to be the person she was chosen over. I tucked the quilt against my chest and walked toward the door. My mother hissed, Natalie, come back here. I didn't. Behind me, Bethany said, loud enough for the room, she's always so sensitive. The funny thing is, I didn't cry in the parking lot. I sat in my car with the quilt on my lap and stared at the country club doors, while women in cream dresses carried gift bags inside. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Don't punish your sister because you can't handle not being the center of attention. I almost laughed. Because in 34 years, I had never once been the center of attention in that family. I drove home, placed the quilt on my bed, and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a folder from my attorney, Daniel Keene. And on the front, in his neat black handwriting, were the words, Estate of Elise Montgomery, Textile Collection and Personal Property. That was when I remembered something my grandmother had told me 6 weeks before she died. Something my mother had begged me not to repeat. That was when I remembered something my grandmother had told me 6 weeks before she died. We were sitting in her little yellow kitchen, the one with the chipped rooster clock and the drawer that never closed unless you hit it with your hip. She had been thinner by then, her wedding ring sliding loose on her finger, but her eyes were still sharp enough to make you tell the truth. She had pointed to the cedar chest under the window and said, Natalie, your mother knows what's in there. Bethany knows what's in there. But you're the only one who ever asked why I kept it. Inside that chest were the fabrics. Not expensive fabric. Not the kind people buy in pretty bundles from craft stores and post online under soft lighting. These were scraps from real life. A blue sleeve from my great-grandfather's work shirt. A rose print piece from the dress Grandma Elise wore to her courthouse wedding. A yellow square from the curtains she made when my mother was born. A green cotton piece from the apron she wore every Christmas Eve. And one strip of white fabric with tiny embroidered strawberries. That one had been mine. When I was 7, I spilled grape juice down the front of my favorite church dress and cried like someone had died. Grandma sat with me on the porch, cut out the only clean panel and said, "Nothing loved has to be wasted, honey. We'll save the part that remembers." I didn't understand then. I understood now, standing beside my bed with that folder in my hands and my sister's laughter still ringing in my ears. I opened the file. Daniel Keene, my attorney, had mailed it 3 days earlier. I had been too busy finishing the binding on Bethany's quilt to look at it closely. That sentence alone makes me sick now. I had put my grandmother's estate papers aside so I could finish a gift for a woman who let her husband drop 9 months of my work like it was a damp towel. The first page was formal. Estate of Elise Montgomery. Inventory. Personal property. Addendum. Then I saw my name. Not my mother's. Not Bethany's. Mine. Elise Montgomery directs that the cedar chest, all textile contents, handwritten pattern journals, sewing tools, and associated family fabric archive be transferred solely to Natalie Ann Wren, with no division, lending, sale, or alteration by any other family member. I read it twice, then a third time. My grandmother had not left me some old sewing stuff, the way my mother described it at the funeral luncheon, while Bethany picked olives off her salad and asked if the chest would fit the nursery theme. Grandma had left me the archive. She had known exactly what it was, and she had protected it. I sank onto the edge of my bed. The quilt spread across my knees, and suddenly a dozen strange moments rearranged themselves in my memory. My mother, Patricia Vale, telling me after the funeral, "Don't make this difficult. Your grandmother wanted everyone to feel included." Bethany asking, too brightly, "Can I take a few of the prettier pieces? I'm doing vintage accents for the baby." The cedar chest missing from Grandma's den the day after the service. My mother saying, "I moved it to my garage for safekeeping." Safekeeping. That word had always been her favorite disguise. When Bethany broke my necklace in high school, Mom kept it for safekeeping until I stopped asking. When Dad's old camera was supposed to be mine, Mom kept it for safekeeping until Bethany used it for a photography elective and never returned it. When Grandma gave me her pearl buttons in a baby food jar, Mom took them because Bethany felt left out, and somehow my kindness was measured by what I surrendered. I had spent years confusing being useful with being loved. I was the daughter who drove Grandma to oncology appointments, the one who cleaned out her refrigerator without being asked, the one who remembered her medications, changed her sheets, held the basin when the nausea got bad. Bethany came with coffee once, took a photo of Grandma's hand in hers, posted it with the caption, "Cherishing every second," and left before the nurse arrived. Mom cried under that post. She never cried when I was rinsing vomit out of towels at midnight. I looked back at the estate paper and felt something cold settle under my ribs. Not rage. Not yet. Recognition. The quilt on my bed was not just a gift Bethany rejected. It was made from property Grandma had legally left to me. Every square, every border, every piece of saved memory my mother had tried to treat like communal emotional currency. And I had carried it into that shower like an offering. I thought of the country club ballroom, the blush pink balloons, the little white cards that said, "Welcome Baby Miller" in gold script. I thought of Bethany in her ivory dress, resting one manicured hand on her belly like she was accepting an award. I thought of Grayson Miller lifting the quilt by one corner, barely glancing at it, and letting it slide sideways onto a pile of glossy gift bags. Then Bethany's voice. "She still thinks this family needs her." The cruelest part was how easily everyone understood the joke. No one asked what she meant. No one looked confused. They laughed softly, the way people laugh when they've heard the private version before. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my mother's text again. "You embarrassed, Bethany. I hope you're proud." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. For one wild second, I wanted to type everything. The will, the chest, the fact that Grandma had trusted me, not them. I wanted to send a photo of the paragraph with my name circled in red, but then I remembered Grandma's other sentence. She had squeezed my wrist in that kitchen and whispered, "Don't announce what you can prove, Natalie. People who stole from you will call your pain drama. Let the paper speak first." So I didn't answer my mother. Instead, I took pictures of every page. I photographed the quilt, front and back, including the strawberry strip. I found the old paper tag Grandma had pinned to the fabric bundle in her shaky handwriting. "For Natalie. She knows the stories." I laid it beside the estate document and took one more photo. Then I opened my email and wrote to Daniel Keene. Subject: Urgent question about Grandma Elise's textile archive. My hands were steady as I typed. That surprised me. Maybe because a part of me had finally stopped begging them to see me. I wrote about the cedar chest, the fabrics, the quilt, and the shower. I explained that my mother had taken possession of the chest after the funeral, and that I had only received part of its contents after asking repeatedly. I attached the photos. At the end, I wrote one sentence that made me pause. I need to know whether anyone else had the right to use, keep, gift, or display these materials without my permission. I hit send at 11:47 p.m. Then I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark with the quilt wrapped around my shoulders. For the first time all day, I didn't feel foolish for making it. I felt foolish for giving it to the wrong person. The next morning, my phone rang while I was pouring coffee. Daniel's office number lit up the screen, and before I even answered, I knew the air in my kitchen had changed. His paralegal, Marin, didn't do small talk. "Natalie," she said carefully, "Daniel reviewed your email. He wants you to come in today if possible." My stomach tightened. Is something wrong? There was a pause just long enough to tell me the answer was yes. Then she said, "He believes your grandmother anticipated this." Then she said, "He believes your grandmother anticipated this." For a second, I didn't understand what that meant. I was standing barefoot in my hallway with my phone pressed to my ear, staring at the quilt folded across the back of my couch, like it was breathing. Morning light hit the blue square from Grandma Elise's church dress, the one she wore every Easter, and I suddenly felt like she was in the room again. "Anticipated what?" I asked. The receptionist paused, then lowered her voice. "Ms. Wren, Mr. Keene asked me to tell you not to give the quilt to anyone. Not your mother. Not your sister. Not temporarily. Not for display. Not for family reasons." His exact words. My mouth went dry. Why would he say that? Because there's a handwritten addendum. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. The next hour felt unreal. Daniel Keene called me personally at 9:17. He had that calm attorney voice people use when they know the room is about to catch fire, but they refuse to smell smoke first. "Natalie," he said, "your grandmother left very specific instructions regarding her textile archive." "I thought she just left me the cedar chest." "She did, but not just the chest. The fabrics, unfinished blocks, labels, sewing journals, photographs, pattern notes, and any completed works created from those materials by you." I sat down slowly. "Completed works?" "Yes," he said, "including quilts." I looked at the one on my couch. Then Daniel said, "There is also a clause stating that if any member of your immediate family attempts to claim, sell, display, alter, damage, or represent those materials as theirs without your written consent, the executor is authorized to intervene." I almost laughed, but nothing funny came out. Grandma had known. She had known the way my family worked. She had watched my mother smile while taking credit. She had watched Bethany turn every room into a stage and every gift into proof she was adored. She had watched me fold myself smaller so no one had to admit they'd stepped on me. Daniel asked me if anything had happened. I told him about the shower. Not dramatically. Just the facts. Grayson tossing the quilt. Bethany laughing. My mother asking me not to make a scene. The way the room went quiet, then pretended it hadn't. Daniel was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "Did anyone photograph it?" I closed my eyes. Because of course they had. Bethany's entire shower had been filmed in little glowing rectangles. Her college friends had recorded the balloon arch. My cousin Kelsey had taken pictures of every gift. Patricia had made everyone pose under a sign that said, "Baby Miller is already so loved." Already so loved. I opened Instagram with shaking hands. Bethany had posted a carousel. Photo 1, Bethany in a cream dress, hands on her stomach. Photo 2, the dessert table. Photo 3, Grayson pretending to assemble a stroller. Photo 4 made my chest tighten. The quilt was visible on the gift table. Not folded nicely. Not treated like something made by human hands. It was half slid under a stack of pastel gift bags, one corner dragging near the floor. And there, in the caption, Bethany had written, "Overwhelmed by how loved this baby is. Some gifts are store-bought, some are sentimental. All are appreciated. Can't wait to use Grandma Elise's vintage quilt in the nursery." Grandma Elise's vintage quilt. Not my quilt. Not made by Natalie. Not stitched for 9 months. Not cut from fabric Grandma gave me. Just another pretty thing Bethany had absorbed because she liked the way it looked beside her life. I sent the screenshot to Daniel. He responded in under 2 minutes. "Please do not engage with them directly. Preserve all messages. I'll be in touch today." I was still staring at that text when my phone buzzed again. "Mom?" I almost didn't answer, but some old reflex in me still lifted the phone. "Natalie," she said, sharp before hello, "Bethany is crying." Of course she was. "She saw you left early," Mom continued. "People noticed." I looked at the quilt. "Did people notice what Grayson did?" There was a pause. "Natalie, don't start." That phrase, "don't start," it was the family's favorite way of pretending I was inventing the fire while standing in the ashes. "Mom," I said quietly, "Bethany posted my quilt online and called it Grandma Elise's vintage quilt." "Well, isn't it?" Something in me went very still. "No," I said, "it isn't. I made it. With Grandma's fabric. With fabric she left to me." My mother made a small irritated sound. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You always get possessive about things that should belong to the family." I actually pulled the phone away and looked at it. The family. That magical word they used whenever they meant Bethany. "Grandma left the cedar chest to me," I said. "She left it in your care," Mom corrected. "No, to me." Another silence. This one was different. Thin, alert. "Who told you that?" "My attorney." The word changed the room, even though my mother wasn't in it. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. "Why are you involving an attorney over a baby shower?" "I didn't involve him over a baby shower. Grandma involved him before she died." She exhaled hard. "Natalie, listen to me. Bethany is pregnant. She does not need stress. That quilt would mean a lot in the nursery." "And what would it mean to me?" She didn't answer. Not because she didn't hear me. Because the question had never mattered. By noon, Bethany texted me, "Are you seriously threatening Mom with a lawyer over a blanket?" A blanket. I stared at that word until it blurred. Then another message came. "You embarrassed yourself yesterday. Grayson was joking. Everyone thought you were being weird and intense." Then another. "Also, Grandma would have wanted her first great-grandbaby to have that quilt. Not for you to hoard it in your sad little townhouse." There it was. Not rage. Not panic. Information. I screenshotted everything. At 2:38, Daniel emailed me a scanned copy of Grandma's handwritten addendum. Her handwriting slanted slightly upward, like it was always trying to climb. "My textile materials are to pass to Natalie Ann Wren only. She understands their history. She understands patience. She understands repair." I read that sentence 3 times. Then came the part that made me cover my mouth. If Patricia or Bethany attempts to pressure Natalie into surrendering these items, I ask that Daniel Keene remind them that love is not inheritance, and inheritance is not proof of love. Grandma had written their names. Not family, not others. Patricia, Bethany. I cried then. Not loudly. Not the way Bethany cried, with an audience waiting. I cried because for the first time in my life, Someone had seen the pattern clearly enough to write it down before I had to prove it. That evening, Daniel sent a formal letter by email to my mother, Bethany, and Grayson. It was simple. No threats in bold, no dramatic language. It identified the quilt as my personal property, created from materials bequeathed solely to me. It instructed them to remove or correct any public representation, implying the quilt belonged to Bethany, the baby, or the Montgomery Vale family collectively. It also warned them not to request possession again. I thought they would go quiet. They didn't. At 7:11 that night, Bethany posted again. A black screen with white text. Heartbroken when family values objects more than babies. I knew that one would travel fast. By 7:20, my cousin Kelsey messaged me. Hey, I don't want drama, but is this about the quilt? Because I recorded Grayson throwing it and Beth laughing. I thought it was mean. Do you want the video? I sat up. You're really doing this over a blanket? That word did something to me. Not because it was new, because it was honest. A blanket. That was all she had ever allowed my work to be. Not months of stitching after work with my wrists aching. Not Grandma Elise's saved fabric from feed sacks, apron hems, church dresses, and the blue cotton she wore in the last photograph we took together. Not a record of women who had held this family together without ever being thanked. A blanket. Before I could type, my mother called. I let it ring. She called again. Then came the voicemail. Natalie, this is getting embarrassing. Bethany is pregnant. You are upsetting her over something you chose to give away. If you involve lawyers, you will regret what that does to this family. Her voice was calm. That was always worse. My mother never screamed when she was cruel. She folded cruelty neatly and handed it to you like a church bulletin. I saved the voicemail. Then, I screenshotted Bethany's post again before she could delete it. There it was, glowing on my phone like evidence dressed in pink balloons. So grateful for heirloom gifts from family. Baby Miller is already so loved. The picture showed the quilt, draped over the white velvet chair Bethany had rented for the shower. Not folded, not respected, displayed, and in the corner, cropped badly, you could see Grayson's hand holding a champagne flute and two women leaning over the quilt, touching the squares. One of them was my Aunt Lila. The other was Marjorie Crane, my grandmother's oldest friend. My stomach tightened. Marjorie knew those fabrics. She had been there when Grandma Elise sorted them into paper bags with blue painter's tape labels. Sunday dress. Kitchen curtains. Evelyn's christening gown. Do not cut without asking Natalie. I texted Daniel Keene the screenshots, the voicemail, and a photo of the quilt on my bed. His reply came 12 minutes later. Do not engage further tonight. I will send formal notice in the morning. Then, another message. Also, Ms. Crane contacted our office at 8:14 p.m. I read that line 3 times. Marjorie? My phone rang again, but this time it was not my mother. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, then answered. Natalie? The voice was thin but steady. Yes? It's Marjorie Crane, sweetheart. I closed my eyes. For 1 second, I was 8 years old again, sitting under Grandma's quilting frame while Marjorie and Elise drank coffee and talked over my head like the world could be repaired with thread. I saw the post, Marjorie said, and I saw what happened at that ridiculous shower. My throat closed. You were there? I was by the coffee urn. I saw him drop it. I heard what your sister said. The hallway seemed to tilt. She said I still think this family needs me, I whispered. Marjorie breathed out sharply. Yes, and your mother heard it too. That was the sentence that broke something cleanly. Not because I was surprised. Because I wasn't. Marjorie continued, softer now. Your grandmother knew, Natalie. Maybe not that exact moment. But she knew how they treated what mattered to you. That's why she made Daniel write it down. Write what down? There was a small pause. Paper rustled on her end. She left a letter with me, I was told to give it to Daniel only if Patricia or Bethany tried to claim the textile chest, the fabrics, or anything you made from them. My hand tightened around the phone. I gave it to him tonight. I couldn't speak. She loved you, Marjorie said, and she trusted you because you were the only one who understood that memory is not clutter. The next morning, Daniel's office called at 8:03. His paralegal, Simone, had the kind of voice that made bad news sound organized. Ms. Wren, Mr. Keene has sent a preservation and cease and desist letter to Patricia Vale, Bethany Miller, and Grayson Miller. He has also requested removal of all public posts showing the quilt and instructed them not to represent the piece as belonging to them or baby Miller. I stood in my kitchen in the same clothes from the night before, staring at my untouched coffee. And the letter from Marjorie? I asked. Mr. Keene reviewed it. Your grandmother was very specific. My eyes burned. Simone continued. There is also mention of a second item. A ledger. A ledger? Yes. A handwritten inventory of the fabric archive. Apparently your grandmother documented the origin of each piece. I looked toward my bedroom. The quilt was lying across my bed, gold morning light touching the blue square from Grandma's old dress. Do they know that? I asked. They do now. By noon, the family group chat was on fire. My cousin Paige texted first. Wait, why is Aunt Patricia saying Natalie stole from Bethany's nursery? Then Uncle Ron wrote, nobody stole anything. I saw Elise's cedar chest go to Natalie years ago. Bethany replied almost instantly. This is private. Natalie is weaponizing Grandma because she can't stand not being the center of attention. I stared at the message. For once, I didn't defend myself. Daniel had told me not to engage, but he hadn't told me I couldn't attach a document. So I sent one image. Just one. Then Patricia sent the message I had waited my whole life to see in writing. You have always been jealous that Bethany is easier to love. I read it once. Then I forwarded it to Daniel. Not because it was legally useful. Because for the first time in my life, I wanted someone outside that family to see the exact shape of the wound. At 4:40 that afternoon, Bethany showed up at my apartment. Not alone. My mother was with her, wearing the cream cardigan she wore when she wanted to look fragile in public. Bethany had on oversized sunglasses, even though the hallway had no windows. Grayson stood behind them holding his phone, smirking like this was going to be entertaining. I opened the door but left the chain on. My mother's eyes flicked to it. Natalie, she said, quietly scandalized, take that off. No. Bethany pushed her sunglasses up. Her eyes were red, but not in a way that made me soften. You made me look like a thief. You posted something that wasn't yours. It was a gift, she snapped. I never gave it to you. Grayson laughed under his breath. You brought it to the shower. I brought it to show Bethany before deciding whether she deserved it. The word surprised even me. Bethany's face changed. My mother leaned closer to the door. Do you hear yourself? Deserved it? This is ugly, Natalie. No, I said. Ugly was watching him drop 9 months of my work onto a table like a sack of laundry while Bethany laughed. Bethany's mouth trembled. It was a joke. It was a pattern. That landed. For a second, the hallway was completely still. Then my mother said, Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. I reached beside the door and picked up the copy of Grandma's letter Daniel had couriered over that afternoon. I unfolded it carefully. No, I said. She was prepared for you. My mother went pale. No, she was prepared for you. The hallway went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming through my apartment door. My mother's face changed first. Not softened. Not ashamed. Just exposed. Like someone had pulled open a curtain before she'd finished hiding everything behind it. Bethany's hand tightened around her purse strap. That's disgusting, she said. Using Grandma against us. I looked at the quilt folded over my arm, the corner with the faded blue roses resting against my wrist. I'm not using her, I said. I'm finally listening to her. Grayson gave a small laugh, but it came out thinner than before. This is insane. It's a blanket. Daniel Keene's assistant had told me to document everything, so I lifted my phone. Say that again, I told him. He stared at me. Say on camera that the quilt made from Elise Montgomery's protected textile collection is just a blanket. Say you threw it onto a gift table and your wife posted it online as hers. Say my mother left me a voicemail pressuring me to give it back. Bethany's eyes snapped to my phone. Turn that off. No. My mother whispered, Natalie. And there it was. Not anger. Not love. A warning. The same warning I'd heard when Bethany ruined my graduation dinner by announcing her engagement. When my mother told me to smile because Bethany needed her moment. When Grandma's cedar chest disappeared from her spare room and everyone acted confused, while Bethany suddenly had a nursery full of vintage fabric bunting, I unlocked my phone and played the voicemail. My mother's voice filled the hallway. Natalie, don't make this ugly. Bethany is pregnant. You know how emotional she gets. Just give her the quilt, and we can all move on. Grandma would want peace. Bethany looked away. Then I opened the group chat screenshots. Aunt Marla, Cousin June, 3 neighbors from my grandmother's church. Everyone had seen Bethany's post. Can you send me that? My aunt had written. Elise told me Natalie was the only one allowed to cut those fabrics. That was when Bethany finally cracked. She always liked you more, she said, and her voice came out raw. Everyone acts like you're so quiet and good, like you're the only one who cared about her. I sat with her, I said. You took pictures with her. My mother flinched. Bethany's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The next morning, Daniel called again. This time, I answered on speaker while standing in my kitchen, the quilt spread safely across my dining table. He had already sent Patricia and Bethany a formal notice. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just clear. The cedar chest, the textile archive, and any pieces made from that fabric belonged to me. Bethany's social media post claiming the quilt as a family gift had to come down. The nursery photos showing Grandma's fabric bunting had to be accounted for. Any remaining materials taken from the chest had to be returned. By noon, the post was gone. By 3, Bethany sent me a text. You're really doing this to your pregnant sister? I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, no. Natalie, if they try to make you feel guilty, remember, love does not require you to be robbed. I sat on my living room floor and cried so hard I had to press the fabric to my mouth. Not because I had won, because someone had known. The consequences weren't loud, but they lasted. Bethany stopped inviting me to things where I was useful. My mother stopped calling unless she needed something, and when I didn't answer right away, she learned to leave no voicemail. Grayson blocked me after Daniel requested the return of the bunting fabric. Half of it came back in a trash bag, wrinkled and smelling like baby powder. I washed each piece by hand. Then, I locked the chest. 6 months later, Bethany had her baby. A girl. My mother texted me one photo from the hospital. No message. Just the baby wrapped in a pink store-bought blanket. For a moment, I felt the old pull. The ache to prove I was good. To rush in with soup, gifts, forgiveness, and my hands open. Instead, I set my phone down and finished binding a small quilt I had started for myself. Not for Bethany. Not for peace. For me, it had one square from every woman who had survived being useful in my family. Grandma's blue roses. My great-grandmother's apron. A tiny piece of fabric from an old blouse I wore the year I finally stopped begging to be chosen. I keep it across the foot of my bed now. And every morning, when the light hits those uneven stitches, I remember the truth my grandmother tried to leave me before anyone else could rewrite it. Family can be inheritance, but so can silence. So can guilt. So can being trained to hand over the most beautiful parts of yourself and call it love. I don't do that anymore. The quilt my sister laughed at never went into her nursery. It never became a prop in her perfect little life. It came home. So did I. If this story hit something personal for you, tell me. Have you ever made something with love for someone who treated it like nothing? And do you think Natalie was right to protect the quilt, even from her own family? If you want more stories about family betrayal, quiet strength, and the moment someone finally stops being used, please like this video and subscribe.